So there I was, standing on my porch, still half asleep in slippers and holding a mug of coffee, watching a guy from the HOA whip out a taser and shoot it at my wife. Yeah, my wife. What I didn't know, she's ex-Special Forces. And her old unit, they were already watching, laser sights quietly trained on the dude's chest like he was the opening act of a very short show. Now, before you start with, wait, what? How is that even legal? Welcome to our neighborhood, where legal is more like a loose suggestion. And as for my wife not noticing, oh, she noticed. Marie always notices. She just let the guy go through the motions because, let's be honest, she doesn't exactly get rattled by HOA rent-a-cops cosplaying as tactical operatives. Me? I flinched hard. One minute we were debating if we had enough charcoal for a weekend cookout, and the next, she's on the driveway like a sack of potatoes, and some guy with a fake badge and a walkie-talkie is yelling like he's raiding a war zone. Let's rewind. About 6 months ago, we moved into Greenbrier Estates. The brochure made it sound perfect, quiet, secure, family-friendly. What it really meant was tyrannical HOA that thinks it's running a paramilitary camp. Every house looks the same. The lawns are more heavily policed than actual roads. And don't even think about dragging your trash bins out before the official time. Marie thought it was a joke from day one. She used to joke that the HOA guidelines were longer than her deployment manual, but she went along with it. For the peace, the good schools, the EDM-free nights. But the real trouble started with her Jeep. Her matte black military-style Jeep, which, one day, was parked slightly over the driveway, barely brushing the grass. The next morning, we had a violation notice taped to the door like it was a top-secret threat alert. I laughed. Marie didn't. She scanned it, filed it into a folder she titled Greenbrier Nonsense, and that's when I should have known. She was already making moves. The HOA president. Yes, her real name is Carrie-Nette, and no, she doesn't get the irony. Ran the place like a low-budget dictator. She had a laminated clipboard she clutched like a crown and pastel sweaters that she wore like battle armor. She hated Marie from the start, claimed she gave off hostile energy and masculine intimidation. Honestly, I think she was just mad Marie didn't blink when she gave her community harmony starts with curb appeal speech. Marie said, "Cool story," and went back to tuning the Jeep. That, apparently, earned us weekly inspections and multiple citations for combat vehicles disturbing neighborhood tranquility. But the real shift came when the HOA launched the so-called Greenbrier Civil Enforcement Division. Sounds official, right? Don't be fooled. It was 5 middle-aged dudes who looked like they got kicked out of TSA training, decked out in matching polos and camo pants, rocking knockoff badges with titles like Safety Lead. They carried massive flashlights and pepper spray, and one of them even practiced batting techniques in the cul-de-sac like he was starring in a budget action movie. Marie, of course, barely reacted. She once negotiated with cartel leader using only a wristwatch and a translator. This was just amateur hour. She didn't say much, but I noticed she started taking longer walks, chatted with neighbors, and running wires through the attic. I asked if she was planning something. She just smiled and said, "Just watching. They're not ready yet." And I knew better than to press. Meanwhile, the HOA's little task force got bolder. They installed cameras on stop signs, tried to fine kids for using sidewalk chalk, issued a citation to someone's grandma for a garden gnome that was giving the finger. No joke. They treated it like a hate crime. Then one day, I caught one of them pretending to inspect the air quality while peering through our window. Marie didn't yell. She simply asked if he wanted to see how well pepper spray works on someone who's been tear gassed before breakfast. He left. Fast. All of this built up to the 4th of July. Our low-key backyard barbecue turned into a neighborhood vent session disguised as grilled hot dogs and lawn chairs. People were over it. HOA meetings had become pure theater. Carrie-Nette banging her gavel, while someone in the back muttered about the place turning into East Berlin. We hosted the cookout. Marie parked the Jeep right out front, square in view of the HOA sign. And right on cue, the enforcement team showed up, now with printed citation books and matching tactical vests. I was flipping burgers when I saw them moving like they were storming a fortress. 5 guys, one with a body cam, announcing, We are engaging the target vehicle. Marie stood in front of the Jeep, arms folded. Silent. They gave her a warning. She shrugged. Go ahead. Try it. And they did. Which brings us back to that porch moment. The taser fired, Marie went down, and I froze. But then red laser dots started lighting up across their vests and limbs, like the universe itself had decided enough was enough. That's when the taser guy's face changed. From the hedges, from the garage roof, from the alley, Marie's old team emerged. Calm, quiet, fully armed. Marie blinked, smirked, and said, always wonder what getting stunned by a rookie felt like. What nobody realized then. Marie had been gathering receipts for months. Every overreach, every bogus ticket, every creep moment, documented. The funny thing about power-hungry HOAs, they never see themselves as the villains. They truly believe they were frontline defenders in some imaginary suburban battlefield, holding back the chaos with clipboards and cargo pants. Like someone grilling too close to a hedge would spark a full-blown neighborhood apocalypse. After the taser incident, which, just to remind you, ended with Marie opening one eye like a cat that got splashed mid-nap, you'd think it would have all stopped, that they'd pause, take a long, hard look at themselves, and maybe rethink their choices after electrocuting a decorated special ops veteran in full view of half the neighborhood. But no, that would require reflection, maybe even guilt. And people like Carrie Nett Withers, yes, that Carrie Nett, our pastel-clad HOA overlord, don't do guilt. They go harder. Carrie Nett decided Marie was the issue, not the unlawful use of a taser, not her fantasy enforcement squad creeping through people's yards at night. No, the real threat to neighborhood unity was a woman with military resume and a mean side eye. Marie, according to her, was disruptive, aggressive, and this is a direct quote, generating a destabilizing emotional frequency, like she'd come back from a weekend meditation retreat and thought she was channeling Yoda. So what did Queen Carrie Nett do next? She called an emergency HOA meeting, not to address the incident, not to offer an apology, but to unveil a brand new policy, a ban on military-style vehicles and visually confrontational objects on private property. Yep, that's right. A pointed jab at Marie and her Jeep. The language was vague enough to sound professional, but laser-targeted at one driveway. And to top it all off, she rebranded her ragtag clipboard crew. No longer the Greenbrier Civil Enforcement Division. They were now the Neighborhood Stabilization Task Force. I couldn't even say it with a straight face. When we found the notice taped to our door, Marie read it, laughed out loud for 10 whole seconds, then folded it up with surgical precision and filed it in her binder. Yes, she had a binder now, color-coded, tabs and everything. Violations, fabricated infractions, creepy surveillance attempts, and my personal favorite, absurd phrases. That one had gems like unlawful wind chime acoustics and non-conforming Cecil flag placement. But Marie didn't yell, didn't make a scene. She just went for a longer than usual run the next morning. That's when I noticed she wasn't jogging anymore. She was taking mental notes, route mapping, observing. Turns out, she'd already turned the dusty closet under the stairs into her personal ops center. No weapons, no drama, just files, thumb drives, timelines, screenshots from neighborhood doorbell cams, many of which weren't even ours. Apparently, the neighbors had started coming to her, quietly, sending footage, stories, fines, all the little ways they'd been bullied. The guy across the street, Jim, retired, big into restoring classic cars, got fined for non-regulation tarp anchoring. Another neighbor, a single mom with 2 kids, cited for her dog collar being excessively reflective under HOA lighting. Everyone had been hit. No one had fought back. Until Marie and her old unit, they were involved. Quietly, but definitely involved. Nothing official. Just present. Alex, one of her teammates, just so happened to live a few streets over. Started walking his dog by our place multiple times a day. Javi, another, worked private security downtown. Somehow managed to install a few client-requested security cams around the block. All within the rules. All within reason. Just watching. Meanwhile, The HOA squad kept ramping things up. They started appearing unannounced, treating front yards like they were red zones. Citation pads in hand like VIP lists at a club no one wanted into. They measured lawn height with tape measures, took photos of porch decor, left passive-aggressive notes like, exterior light fixture may exceed brightness threshold. At one point, I'm not even kidding, they used a drone, hovered it over a neighbor's backyard, probably looking for barbecue violations. Marie caught that too, labeled the footage, aerial overreach, Exhibit A. The binder was getting thick, and she was building something big. I didn't know exactly what, but I could feel it. Carrie-Netta, of course, strutted to the neighborhood like she'd won, smiled like a queen waving from her chariot, clipboard tucked under her arm like a royal decree. But behind the trimmed lawns and forced smiles, people were seething, each street a slow-burning fuse. And Marie? She was just standing nearby, holding a match. Patient. Then came the chalk incident. A bunch of little kids, sweet, innocent, barely old enough to write their names, had covered the sidewalk near the playground in colorful chalk drawings. Rainbows, rockets, a unicorn that looked like it had a rough night. Wholesome stuff. Stuff that makes your heart soften. Carrying it did not soften. She called it defacement of shared community space and issued a $100 fine to every household involved. She even sent her squad to photograph the damage before it could be erased by rain. That broke people. The next HOA meeting, usually a ghost town with maybe 5 sleepy residents and a bowl of mints, was packed, wall to wall. Furious parents, quiet retirees, new residents who'd had enough. Marie sat in the back, her binder on her lap, silent. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Everyone else spoke for her now. They shouted, demanded accountability, called out the nonsense. And when Carrie-Netta tried to slam her gavel like a sitcom judge and yell about civility, nobody flinched. She stormed out. The next morning, another notice, taped neatly to our door like always. This one read, Final warning, vehicle in violation of subsection 7.3.1b, presence of warlike aesthetic. Marie smiled, tight-lipped, composed, like a poker player sitting on a royal flush. She didn't even glance up from her laptop. I asked what she was working on. Just a little summary, she said, tying off a few loose ends. Then she looked at me and added, calm as ever, I think it's time. That evening, as the sun dropped behind the rows of look-alike houses, and the sprinklers hissed their rhythm across the perfectly regulated lawns, 2 things happened simultaneously. First, her phone buzzed, group chat lighting up like a warning beacon. Second, an unmarked envelope slid beneath our front door. It was blank except for one line in bold, blocky print. We know what she's doing. I picked it up, raised a brow in her direction. She didn't flinch. If anything, she looked amused, maybe even impressed. They're trying to warn us, she said, not even pretending to be rattled. But they still haven't figured out they're not the ones being hunted. The next day was supposed to be a normal 4th of July cookout. Nothing fancy. No fireworks, no speeches. Just burgers, cold drinks, and neighbors who needed a break from the weird tension that had been growing like mold under fresh paint. We invited the usual crew, some friends, a few fed-up locals, Jim from across the street with a pristine, anxiety-prone 67 Mustang. But Marie, she had that look again. That mix of serenity and calculation. Like someone standing 3 moves ahead in a chess game they knew they'd already won. I didn't ask questions. Just focus on marinating the chicken. By noon, the scent of grilled meat and garlic drifted lazily down the block. Kids zipped by on scooters. A Bluetooth speaker played a questionable remix of patriotic anthems. And the backyard was giving off major family-friendly ad energy. You'd never guess that just a day before, Marie had casually filed away a cryptic envelope, like it was an expired coupon. It was around 3 p.m. when I spotted them. 3 of the HOA's finest, trudging down the sidewalk in formation like they were preparing to breach enemy territory. Same tactical polos. Same overstuffed cargo pockets. One gripped a radio like it was about to detonate. The other scanned the area like undercover mall security with delusions of grandeur. They stopped at the corner, huddled, whispered into the radio. I could see one of them gesturing toward our house. Marie noticed, of course. She didn't react, just kept placing napkins and paper plates like she was hosting a Pinterest-perfect brunch. And the Jeep, still parked proudly at the curb, shining defiantly in the sun, almost mocking them. She hadn't hidden it. She hadn't even moved it. She'd parked it right in front of the HOA's official Community Harmony sign, and she stuck a little American flag on the dashboard, just for flavor. The 3 officers approached like they were about to raid a compound. One started recording with his phone. Another flipped open a citation pad. The third, a stocky guy with mirrored sunglasses and the facial expression of someone permanently constipated, took the lead. He stepped forward, puffed out his chest, and declared with great authority, "This vehicle violates Greenbrier Code 14.2.5. He was talking to the air more than to anyone in particular. Marie, who had just handed a juice box to one of the neighbor kids, turned slowly, looked at the Jeep, then at him. Her voice was perfectly neutral. What part? The freedom or the horsepower? The guy didn't like that. His jaw twitched. His backup moved in closer like backup dancers entering stage left. I saw a few neighbors shift uneasily. Jim, who had been flipping burgers, leaned toward me and muttered, "They're really going to pull this stunt at a barbecue?" Apparently, they were. The guy in sunglasses pulled out a laminated card, official HOA style, and held up like a badge. "This is your final warning. Failure to remove this unauthorized vehicle will result in enforcement action by authority of the Greenbrier HOA and its designated task force." Someone in the crowd coughed and said, "Who died and made you the lawn Gestapo?" Marie smiled again. Subtle, controlled. A smile that said, "You don't scare me. I've negotiated with warlords who bathed in gasoline." Then she stepped in front of the Jeep, arms loosely crossed. "You want to move it? Go ahead," she said, "but you'll have to go through me." The silence that followed felt like a stretched rubber band. Nobody moved. The officer holding the citation pad looked like he was rethinking his life choices. The one with the phone slowly began lowering it. But Sunglasses Guy, he doubled down. His hand hovered over the taser on his belt. "You are obstructing an authorized enforcement process," he said, stepping forward. "You have 5 seconds to comply, or we will use non-lethal measures to restore community order." Even the wind stopped. No one breathed. Kids clung to parents. I could feel it in my chest. He was actually going to do it. And then he did. With one swift motion, he yanked the taser free and aimed it directly at Marie. You'd think this would be the moment someone shouted, "Don't!" or "This is crazy." But there was no time. Before I could move, before even Marie could get a word out, zap, the taser snapped and she dropped. A collective gasp. Someone shouted. Someone else dropped a plate. I dropped my beer. And then the real show started. Because right as Sunglasses Guy stood there, half shocked by what he'd just done, I saw it, a flash of red on his chest. Then another. Laser dots. Not toys. Not lasers from cat pointers or party gadgets. Real ones. Steady, dead on. Coming from every direction. From the hedges. From a second-story window across the street. From behind the neighbor's fence. Marie's team appeared, one by one. No shouting. No dramatics. Just calm, focused professionals moving into position like Miss creeping in under a locked door. I counted 5, maybe more. Each one armed. Each one silent. Watching the HOA goons like they were prey in a trap already sprung. Sunglasses Guy froze mid-step. The other 2 backed away slowly. Not a single person spoke. Not even the kids who stood frozen, eyes wide, as if they'd stumbled into a live-action spy film. And then Marie rolled over. Not dazed. Not panicked. Just amused. Marie rolled over, pushed herself up on one arm, and said, her tone almost casual, "You need to recalibrate your aim." That shot was low and left. The collective sound of half the neighborhood's jaws hitting the grass was almost comical. She stood, brushed off her pants, and glanced at the taser wires now dangling from her shirt. With a smooth, practiced motion, she yanked them out like someone adjusting a loose thread on a favorite sweater. Sunglasses Guy, He froze. His hand dropped the taser, not deliberately. It was like his body had decided to stop obeying orders. His knees buckled just enough that it looked like his brain was trying to escape the situation without his body's consent. Marie walked toward him slowly, her movements deliberate, measured, like she had all the time in the world. "You just tasered a federal asset," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "Do you even know how many laws you've broken? Do you know the difference between a civilian enforcement rule and a real statute?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. One of her team members, a guy in a crisp black jacket, stepped forward and handed Marie a folder. "Everything's ready," he said. Marie nodded, flipped open the folder, and smiled. "That was when I realized this wasn't a barbecue. It was a trap, and we weren't the ones being watched anymore. They were." The whole neighborhood seemed to freeze, like someone had hit the pause button on the world. Sunglasses guy stood there, hands still slightly raised, sweat beading on his forehead, eyes darting from Marie to the shadows where red laser dots danced across his chest. Karanet was nowhere to be seen. Of course, the so-called Queen of Greenbrier had missed the one chance to be present during a disaster she'd helped orchestrate. Maybe, just maybe, she'd known this was coming and decided to let one of her disposable goons take the fall. Either way, the atmosphere had shifted. You could feel the tension in the air, like a wire about to snap. And this time, it wasn't Marie who was going to take the fall. Marie stood at the center of the chaos, completely in control. She wasn't gloating. She wasn't shouting or threatening. She was calm, methodical, as she flipped through the pages of the folder her teammate had given her, like she was casually choosing what to have for lunch. Then she turned to the crowd, which had now swelled with nearly every neighbor on the block, and raised her voice just enough to be heard. "In case you're wondering," she said, "everything you've seen today has been documented. Body cams, drones, witness statements. It's all here." She tapped the folder lightly. "And it's already been submitted." Sunglasses guy finally found his voice, though it came out weak, almost stammering. "Submitted to who?" Marie didn't even blink. She glanced at him, then tilted her head toward a man who had just stepped onto the curb behind her. He was tall, wearing a sharp suit, and his ID badge was already flipped open, catching the sunlight. "To him," she said, her voice steady, "and to a dozen others like him." The man gave a small nod, then stepped forward. "Agent Clint," he said, his voice carrying easily over the crowd. "Department of Justice, Office of Civil Enforcement. We've been monitoring Greenbrier's HOA since February. Today's events have confirmed enough violations to proceed." The crowd rippled, as if someone had dropped a stone into a calm pond. Whispers spread to the group like wildfire. Eyes widened. Some people covered their mouths, as if they had just witnessed a scandal unfold live on their own sidewalk. Because they had. Marie's old team fanned out, not to intimidate, but to manage the scene. They guided people back, speaking in low voices, making sure no one panicked. They kept a careful eye on the HOA goons, most of whom were now backing away, as if they might bolt at any second. Agent Clint motioned for two uniformed officers to step forward from an unmarked car parked a few streets away. These weren't local cops. These were federal agents. Efficient, quiet, not here for games. They collected the taser, took statements, and read off legal jargon like it was bedtime poetry. Sunglasses guy didn't say a word as they cuffed him. The guy who had been filming earlier tried to object, but he was immediately reminded that impersonating law enforcement was a serious crime and that resisting would only add years to his sentence. He shut up. Karanet finally showed up 15 minutes late, flanked by two HOA board members who looked like they'd aged 10 years in that time. She strutted in like nothing had happened, chin held high, arms folded, trying to project authority she no longer had. She opened her mouth to speak, but Agent Clint raised a hand to stop her. "Ma'am, you're the acting president of this HOA, correct?" "I am," she said, lifting her chin as though her position could somehow shield her from what was coming. "Then you're responsible for authorizing the creation of the Civil Enforcement Task Force." "Yes," she said, puffing out her chest like that carried some kind of legal weight. "Well then," Agent Clint continued, his voice calm but unmistakably firm, You're also responsible for their actions, their training, and their weapons. You will need to come with us for questioning. Karen actually laughed. Questioning? For what? This is a private association matter. You have no jurisdiction. Clint didn't even blink. Actually, we do. Your HOA has been operating under an expired charter for the past 16 months. You've issued over 200 unlawful citations, collected nearly $100,000 in fines, and created a paramilitary force without any legal oversight. That's not a private association matter. That's a federal one. Karen turned pale. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish trying to breathe out of water. Her board members took a step back. One of them looked like he might faint. Marie handed Agent Clint another document. This includes digital records, emails, meeting notes, several instances where you discuss bypassing your original bylaws to push through punitive regulations. Clint nodded, flipped through the papers, then turned back to Karen. Ma'am, you are officially under investigation for fraud, harassment, abuse of authority, and potential RICO violations. RICO, someone in the crowd whispered. Isn't that for mobsters? Yep, I said, louder than I meant. Yep, it is. Karen was escorted to the same unmarked car, her pastel cardigan fluttering behind her like a surrender flag. She didn't look back, and I didn't expect her to. The neighborhood slowly emptied out over the next hour. People trickled away, murmuring about what they'd witnessed and what came next. Marie and her team stayed behind, quietly speaking with the agents, helping to organize the evidence. At one point, I glanced over and saw Jim from across the street, his eyes a little glassy, holding back tears as he thanked Marie. Apparently, the HOA had threatened to demolish his carport for visual disruption just a month earlier. He thought he'd have to sell his classic Mustang to cover fines. By dusk, the neighborhood had gone quiet again. The agents were gone. The vehicles had disappeared. All that remained was a faint smell of barbecue, a few scattered paper plates, and a deep, satisfying silence. A week later, Greenbrier's HOA was officially dissolved. Without a valid charter, all their policies collapsed. Their fines were nullified. Their records were seized. The so-called task force was banned from any future community leadership positions. Marie didn't gloat. She didn't throw a victory party. She just cleaned up her files, deleted the team group chat, and went back to her regular jogs like nothing had happened. But the board wasn't empty for long. At the next emergency community meeting, someone nominated Marie for HOA president. She didn't campaign. She didn't hand out flyers or shake hands. She just accepted with a slight shrug and a polite smile. Her first act as president, she shredded the rule book. Her second, she issued a new rule. No board member would ever again be allowed to issue citations, fines, or patrol in a vest. The community would run on respect, transparency, and trust, or not at all. At the end of the meeting, she handed me the gavel and whispered, "It's not revenge. It's reconstruction." I believed her, mostly, and just before we left, she glanced out over the quiet crowd and added, "Oh, and by the way, if anyone sees a clipboard with Civil Enforcement Division written on it, toss it in the nearest fire pit." Everyone laughed, loud, relieved, and real. Greenbrier was finally free. And Marie? She wasn't just my wife. She was a ghost of every tyrant's downfall, calm, tactical, patient. And when push came to tase her, she didn't push back. Thank you for watching Untold Realites. Don't forget to subscribe for more. Thumbs up and comments below.